Welcome to Making Chassidus Real, Part 13. Today I want to revisit a concept that we spoke about in the earlier episodes, and it's so important to have this perspective when we learn Chassidus and we try to apply Chassidus, or we learn Torah in general. The concept that we mentioned, and I want to sort of give a different application for it today, is the idea to fully absorb the undiluted concept and to have intellectual clarity. In other words, developing the mindset, as we talked about then, that maybe we're learning about something that's a very high madrega, but something that we can't even reach. And even if we're not holding there at the time, even if we can't apply it at the time, but we don't dilute the concept. Now, this is just to have the clear mind, to understand the undiluted truth and purity of the concepts in Chassidus, irrespective of whether we can reach them or not, irrespective of we can apply them fully or even partially to ourselves or not. Now, this is not only regarding the madregas and the high levels and so on, but it's also regarding certain ideals and certain recommendations of living that we sometimes learn in the Rebbe Sichos and Chassidus in general, which perhaps are overwhelming, intimidating, perhaps we don't think we can achieve it right now, and yet we know what it is. We know what the truth of what it is. Because there is a temptation sometimes when we learn something that demands of us a particular behavior, a particular way of living, and we feel we can't get there at the moment, or we don't seem to be able to apply it at the moment. There's a real temptation to misinterpret and to almost rewrite history, and to reinterpret the sources so that they fit in more to the way we are, to the way we are living. Now, this is a fundamental mistake because, of course, we can't rewrite interpretations. We have to keep the purity and the clarity of what the ideas are. And also, that's not what Chabad Chassidus is all about. It's really to understand the goal, to understand the truth, and to understand what really is expected of us, and then we try and get there as much as we possibly can. So, I wanted to focus on an example today. And that example is the concept of learning limudei chol, secular studies. Now, it's no secret that the Rebbe was not a fan of limudei chol. And what is happening today, often we find that people, to rationalize their own behavior, to rationalize their own approach, try to sort of maneuver the sources a bit. The Rebbe didn't quite mean this, he only meant this type of limudei chol, maybe he only meant going to college, maybe this, maybe that. And it's a fundamental mistake because we need intellectual honesty. Even if we're honest with ourselves that right now, for whatever reason, we just don't feel we can apply the concept properly, but we cannot be intellectually dishonest. One of the foundations, as we said, of Chassidus Chabad is the intellectual clarity, the emes, of knowing what it is in an undiluted way. So let's examine this a little bit. There are so many letters and farbrengens and so on about the limudei chol. One very famous one, of course, was the Sikh of Simchas Torah Toshin Tesvav, printed in Toras Menachem, where the Rebbe was very sharp about the recommendation that he had about not learning and not teaching children chachmas chitzonius, secular studies, which he defined then not only things which are treif, not only secular studies which contain problematic, distorted values or perceptions which are not in line with Torah. But one of the examples that Rebbe gave then is even grammar. He said people feel ashamed that they don't know good English and so on. So even something like grammar, which seems so param and so non-problematic, and yet to the Rebbe that was part of the limudei chol, and very clear that he did not want that to be taught to young children especially. And there are so many other sikhs where the Rebbe talks about that specifically young children should be very, very careful. He links it in other places to what it says in Tanya. In Tanya it says that unless you like the Rambam and the Ramban and know how to use these things, chachmas chitzonius, even if it's sort of kosher chachmas chitzonius, secular studies, limudei chol, affects and clogs up the brain, timtum hamoyach and halev and so on, all these different types of things. Now, obviously, we know that there are many, many exceptions to this. We know that, and this is where the confusion often sets in, There are exceptions where the Rebbe held that there should be a program of secular studies in places where that's what's needed, either because it's absolutely legal, there's no way to get out of it, or it's needed to attract other people to chinuch, a Torah chinuch. There were many such hiros, many such lessons. But those are exceptions to the rule. You need to have a rule before you can have exception. And therefore there's no question that the basis, the foundation is that we should not teach our children the Melacha. The basis is that we should try whatever we can not to teach secular studies. When there's exceptions, and we need to obviously talk to Rabbanim and Mashpim to understand when there's exceptions apply. With regard to our own children, when they apply to our own moistus, the Rebbe himself said that the reason that the Frierdiker Rebbe founded the Lubavitch Yeshiva with secular studies was to attract people at the time. But shortly after that, Simchas Torah Sikha was the foundation of Olei Torah. And just to show you how strong the Rebbe was about this was an unknown fact until a few years ago. After the passing of Mendel Morozov, there was a video that was going around. He was one of the Mashpim in Olei Torah. He was close to Michal Teitelbaum, one of the founder of Olei Torah, where there's no secular studies. And it was a fascinating story that when Olei Torah was established and it became a little bit bigger than just the intended 1 or 2 classes that it was happening in the beginning, and it became very difficult for him to pay salaries, the Rebbe secretly, and he said it should be secretly, funded the yeshiva. He paid the salaries. Until later on there was a donor that came and came from other sources and they started to be able to collect the funds. But that's how close and that's how important this concept was to the Rebbe. Now, of course, there are challenges. People say, well, then we need children to learn communication, to be able to have a language and so on and so forth. And perhaps those institutions that only have secular studies have problems and have other issues. All true, maybe. So they have to be dealt with. But that doesn't change the fact. Problems in a system doesn't invalidate the system. Problems in the application of a hashkafa doesn't invalidate the hashkafa. The yesod, the foundation, is that Rebbe wants children not to learn the Melacha. That is the hashkafa of our Rebbe. In fact, it's an interesting thing, when there's a letter of the Rebbe where he writes to a school, I think, where was supposed to have limud chol to attract other people, and when it's well known that often when the Rebbe agreed there should be a secular studies program in a school that needed to, for hafotza purposes, the Rebbe always wanted that the program of limud chol should be good. If you're doing a program, it should be good. Obviously, it should be kosher, but it should always be secondary, and it should be later on in the day, and it should be always 100% clear that it's secondary to the Kodesh, etc., etc. But the perspective was it should be good in order so people should be attracted to it. But the Rebbe said the approach has to be the following. That it's like a hospital. When you build a hospital, it needs to be state of the art. It needs to be the best facilities possible. Because it's got to be a place where people can heal. But at the end of the day, it's a hospital. A hospital is not where you want to be. A hospital is not a place where we want to send people to. If it's needed, you have a hospital. And it should be a good hospital. These are the things, this is so clear that this is the Rebbe's view. So, maybe for some it's a very difficult thing. It's very difficult what's going to be with Parnasa, and that, that's dealt with in the Rebbe's Sikhas at length. Of course, we have to learn more of that, absorb more of that. But there's no judgment. If someone finds it very difficult, that's okay. But or maybe it's not okay, they need to work on it, but whatever the case is. But there might be individuals who find this a very challenging process, and maybe individuals that come to the realization, I can't apply this, or I can't apply this fully. But one thing we should never do is change and post-rationalize. We need to have clarity. And this is true with lots of things of the Rebbe Shittas, which we're not going to go into now, but I just wanted to give an example. So we need to keep the basic hashkaf, the basic perspective pure, undiluted, exactly what it is. And it's not hypocritical to say, I know what it is, and right now I just can't do it. Maybe I'll work towards it. But let's not change with time. Let's not review, let's not change the basic and clear hashkafas of the Rebbe and of Chassidus just to fit our own position, but rather keep learning, keep understanding, and keep exploring the true and undiluted hashkafa of Chassidus and its teachings. Have a good day.